It looks like it's going through here. It's asking for my favorite emoji here. I
There
like
we
the
go.
rocket ship for this show here, so we'll go with that.
We're all
Um,
started.
we, we do got clearance here for takeoff. My name is David Kirsten. I'm a co-host of Quantum Leap, and Cory is my co-host. If you don't mind doing your introduction, Cory, you know the drill.
Yeah, hey, I am Cory Knott, co-owner of Take Wing Coaching, a collaborative leadership coach, trying that title. And I primarily work with partnerships, so people trying to run a business together and would like it to be harmonious and truly productive. And thank you.
Okay, great. And today we are getting back to our discussion on a project Cory and I are working on called Soloprenuer, which is really a kind of a structure of ideas and um, for solopreneurs on how to take their business to the next level. And we're actually going to be doing, some write-ups in kind of an ebook form at some point. But stay tuned for that later this year. We're kind of hitting the highlights for each of these key topics, which are um, a lot of them are kind of things that Core's worked on more or less for, 15 or 20 years, and his mentors and people who inspire him. And with me, I've kind of come to this stuff a little bit, well, definitely later, about 5 or 6 years ago, but I love studying and going over these ideas. And um, I'll just say today we're going to talk about a branding strategy, referral marketing, and a networking strategy. And these all go together a little bit, but I think there's some really new ground here for most solopreneurs may have never heard of referral marketing, and that's kind of a favorite topic that we go over on this show. So we're going to get into that. Um, I I'm actually have a series of questions here just to pose for Cory, and I'll kind of set up a few things, and we'll just have a discussion on them. I know this is something you've worked on a lot over the past few years, Cory, with you and Gail, your branding strategy. But if you don't mind just introducing, like, what is a branding strategy? Why do you think some it is important even for solopreneurs?
Um, well, I mean, there's a number of ways to look at it, right? There's the brand that might be with your parent company if you have one, but or it might be you, or it might be whatever you take. And I think it all kind of depends on what it is that you're offering and what your intentions are. So the strategy from the beginning ought to be kind of in alignment with what you visualize. If you're working with a company that has its own brand, they may have their own requirements and strategies in place, or you may have to build on that. When we were with Ascentive, I think one of the big challenges we found is that while it was a really attractive brand, nobody knew it existed. So we had a lot to build there. Um, but when we went off on our own as partners, we needed a brand for the firm, which was Take Wing, and then we had the logo developed, and we actually now own the trademark for Take Wing, so we can protect it. Um, but part of that strategy was like we eventually wanted to have more coaches working with us, so that branding strategy was to put it under the auspices of the firm name, right? The brand versus so then that sells our values and mission and everything else. And over time, there's also some development of ourselves, as Gail and I have developed ourselves as coaches. We sometimes also brand under our own names, because as a partner coach, even though that's not really specifically Take Wing, I do have some programs that'll have that. I also need to brand myself, and it can be kind of complicated. Like, do I say it's Cory Knott, business partnership coach, or do I say Take Wing, Wingmates partnership coaching, or is it both? At first it's really about building up my reputation and thought leadership, saying that this is what exists, this is what works, and then eventually I move it under the full brand because I'll train other coaches to do this and maybe have a certification. So it can't really be about me anymore. It needs to be about the brand. So I think I know that's going into a lot of detail, but brand strategy is really important, especially for those who are doing any kind of thought leadership or service oriented work where they have a plan to be more than just a solopreneur.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of great things to set it up there. I think one is that collaborative nature of it, that you may have an idea of what your brand is, but a lot of people see it as something different. I think that's why you almost need like a third party or some type of observer to help you with it. And then it also really changes over time. You almost have to reinvent it if you decide, oh, well, maybe it's better if we're each on our own, but we're together on certain things that you collaborate on. So it kind of evolves over time. But I do think a little bit goes a long way in that a lot of people, before they even get out there in business, get the trademark, or the logo, they may even get merch or something. A lot of that stuff you can kind of develop over time. I do think the logo and some colors, I like the colors that you use. How every workshop or event that you do has some of the purple, maybe some green, that you have just some great materials that I think look good for what you guys do. So just having access to a designer, I think, can really make a big difference for people getting started. We
Yeah,
do
people
plan
notice that. Yeah.
Yeah, we do plan to have a few people back at some point to talk more about the branding, like Lawrence, who did your background. He did my logo. He's a great person to chat with because he's so knowledgeable. Um, Lawrence McCandle, a designer. So we've had him on the show before. You might check out a back episode if you are interested. And we'll move on to the next topic here about referral marketing. And I know this is something we've been kind of over a number of times on this show. And if folks wonder why you repeat things on podcasts, I think that's one of the biggest keys of a business podcast, is to continue to know where your wheelhouse is and your bread and butter. And definitely on this show, it's referral marketing. But if you are a solopreneur coming new to the field, um, I don't know, how would you distinguish, referral marketing versus just general marketing? Why is that different, or why is it important?
Yeah, and I think you can actually distinguish it in a few different things. There's traditional marketing, which could be a lot of social media these days, digital marketing, and so on. There's also word of mouth marketing, which probably tends to apply. People sometimes confuse with referral marketing, but word of mouth marketing would be more about reputation building, clients giving you referrals, kind of using that word of mouth that people say, hey, I use this person, you should try this too, which can be fairly effective and works really well in some industries. The challenge, of course, is you don't really get to choose who are your customers. And referral marketing, not just getting referrals or word of mouth, which is technically getting referrals, referral marketing is actually marketing to the target market that you want through people who can reach that target market. And this is an important distinction because I say, look, I am working with partnerships, and I want to work especially with like spouses, family members, but generally also people who are creative and willing to be coached, right? It's not just like, hey, I do have to do some regular word of mouth and digital marketing, but ultimately referral marketing is best because I can go to my network and say, these are specifically the kind of people I want to work with. And when I get a referral to somebody I don't want to work with, I can refer that out to, a better provider for them. And that's a little harder to do with word of mouth marketing. People, they will badmouth you if you turn them down. But in referral marketing, it's a strategic effort to get the right referrals for your business.
Yeah, it's um, there's a lot to referral marketing. I think that's what uh, distinguishes it too, is that word of mouth, it's everybody knows it's effective, but how do you do it? I think you really have to systematize it, and that's where referral marketing comes in, that there's so much you can learn about it, about how to make it the most effective for your business. I do think as solopreneurs, a lot of them can't afford to go out and test market a product for 6 months with paid trials or whatever. But if you can put it through a referral marketing test and get people to bite on it and get feedback on it. That's all kind of, I find it's great for testing out new services that you can't do really any other way as a solopreneur. I also find a lot of the literature, you know, is very limited on like word of mouth marketing, but there's whole books written on referral marketing, like you mentioned, that the world's uh,
That's no marketing secret. Yeah.
best known marketing secret. If you just crack open that book, it just a whole wealth of information about how it's, how really referral marketing builds on kind of refer to word of mouth marketing. So do check out that book. And I think also, coming to a BNI chapter, Cory and I, we meet every Wednesday. You're welcome to hit us up to come visit our chapter. We could refer you to another chapter, but you really just have to see how it works. It almost doesn't make sense until you see it in action. And there's so many different layers to it that I think it's exciting to dive into something and see how it works. And it also forms a basis for a lot of different forms of collaboration. I know some people even do kind of, you know, fees or, certain, it
Cross
works by a
marketing.
principle called giver's gain. So but anyway, we'll leave it there for now. I think
Well,
we'll
that's
come
actually
back.
another really popular book, and it's not as promoted as much in BNI, but it's called The Go Giver, and it is the basis for provisors, but also a number of other groups, and it's worth reading because I think that Ivan Misner's done a lot of wonderful books, but he's never actually, and he does actually have a book called Giver's Gain, but it's about BNI, and whereas the Go Giver is more of a strategy for this idea of behind Giver's Gain, really building that know, like, and trust. It's just Giver's Gain is trademarked, and it belongs to BNI, but the idea behind it isn't exclusive to BNI for sure. And
Yeah, yeah. We're going to include some of these resources in a future publication, and we'll kind of revisit this and maybe look at some of those resources in particular in a future episode and in the fall, possibly or early next year. So, um,
Yeah, I do want to reiterate something about referral marketing because this goes back to what I trained in and so on. And it is a strategy. I think what David brings up are some enormous benefits of doing referral marketing is you build a network, you have great people, you can test things out on. They often are, open to feedback and helping solve problems. But ultimately, that's not referral marketing. That's more of utilizing the network and the goodwill in your network. You might actually have a referral strategy that just says, I'm going to get referrals from 4 different people. I've met a few people like that. Like, there's only a few people I will take referrals from, but I use the networking to build my wider, um, base of support. So networking can also be a strategy for building support and information, whereas referrals is its own particular strategy. And it's just to be aware of that because sometimes people get so caught up in all the fun things about networking, they forget that they need to have a strategy for getting referrals if that's what they want.
yeah, yeah. I do think learning from some of the greats about, um, in terms of our, listen to the anecdotes that, Ivan Meisner, he shared on that recent interview that we kind of presented on about how um, it enables you to reach people that aren't necessarily in that network that know other people, and it all kind of just builds over time. So you never quite know where it's going to go if you keep really pushing. Ivan Meisner, look at where it put him. Look at where he ended up through it. Of course, they call him the Godfather of networking, but or Mike Macedonio, started out in the restaurant industry and then got in BNI, and he gradually kept upgrading his network until you're kind of really at the very top of the business world. So if you do it effectively, it's looking at how these people use it, talking to them, learning from them. I've learned the most from you among other people because we've spent the most time together, but seeing how you recommend it, but then also I think that concept of power partners is also a big part of it. Like you said, it's those key people here who you can give them something and they can give you something back. So how do you set up that reciprocal relationship? And a lot of it can be information sharing too, which I think can be very useful too. But so
Yeah, I think yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll try to highlight this in a few different areas on the show. I know having Evelyn um, or what's his name, our realtor. I can't. Oh, Declan Spring kind of slips my mind, but hearing how people how they use it is fascinating stuff. So, um, well, this gets to the last topic of the day, which is a networking strategy. And I like what you said about how you really have a referral marketing strategy, but you also have to have a networking strategy. They kind of, fit together a little bit. Then we already talked about the marketing strategy, but I know what would you say about a networking strategy? And what I'm kind of getting at here is I think getting out there for BNI doesn't work if you're only in BNI. You have to be in other groups or other networks. And that's something I really find that you do well is branching out to all these different networks. If you don't mind just telling us a little bit about your own experience here and what people
Yeah, I
like.
networking is one, it's a skill. It's also something some people find tedious, a chore. I mean, I did when I first started, and but there was a point where I realized I liked being around the kind of people who go out networking. They tend to be inspiring, and I hear this a lot. It's like you find a level of people who are. I mean, if you spend your day in an office, you're usually surrounded by people who just spend their days in offices. And so in the networking, you find people are kind of moving forward, and they're optimistic, and they're interested, and, good listeners. It's not always the case. You may run into those, just flat sellers, but I think so. The networking strategy is really finding where it is you want to meet the right people for whatever it is you're looking for. And that's what you've got to figure out. It may be referrals, in which case, if you're doing referral marketing, BNI provisors at a different level are some of the best, and there's also American Spirit and a few others that are very devoted to referrals where they can hold you accountable to it, and meaning other people are there for the same reason. But if you want networking, I mean, David is an active member of Rotary, and Rotary is more about connecting resources for the good of the community. And while there is some business that gets done because, it's that know, like, trust, ultimately Rotary is about another kind of networking. And I highly recommend that for anybody who, not just for their business, but also for being around, again, the right kind of people, and who can connect you to resources if you have a cause, or if you don't have a cause, you can find one. And some Rotary groups are better than others for that, or other types of service groups. So networking strategy is figuring out what you want and where is the best place to go to do that. And if you're just starting in business, I just recommend Alignable. The chambers used to be great, but they don't do as many mixers anymore. Some do. Look for the chamber mixers. Look at Alignable. Look at any of those other things, because there you'll just meet people who are just kind of trying to figure it out along with you. They may not be the best people for mentoring and connecting you to people, but it's just nice to sometimes not feel alone. And I think that's another important strategy for those who feel lonely in their business. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, yeah, and I have a little anecdote that kind of really shows why I've wanted to do this project, Soloprenuer, and is I put out that video with Smiley about his tax preparation business, and we put the El Cerrito Chamber as a collaborator on there on Instagram, and he's like over 200 views in just a couple of days. So it's kind of like you've done this networking, but then how do you kind of maximize that network? And that's kind of like an advanced game. So before he came to me, he wouldn't have known that he even had that potential to one do great video and then use that almost just putting a thing together, and it's like this whole new
Right.
kind of connection, so
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll give another more personal benefit to networking that I tell people who are single, who are in business, is you may find somebody. The thing about finding the right person in your life is finding somebody who shares similar values, and has a similar interests, and um, is going the direction that you're going. And I have seen many people who have found the love of their life in, the networking environment because they're kind of in the same boat together, right? And they get to know each other better that way. I mean, this is how I found my wife. It's how Ivan found his. It's how Mike found his. Mike Macedonia and Don Lyons met each other that way. But there's so many great stories, and so that's another reason you might, as a business owner, network is if you're looking for, friends and a partner in life. It's very possible, and that you'll have a better time there than you would say, in a bar or connections through family.
Yeah, no,
Fine.
agreed. It also, a lot of it happens by chance too.
Yeah,
People who you may not, that you don't quite, if you just keep an open mind, you never know who you're going to meet, and they'll teach you something new about yourself because maybe
yeah,
they have a different value that you really, I want that value, and it changes,
yeah.
changes you for the better, makes you, yeah, more well-rounded.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, what a nice note to end on. We'll bring up, we're gonna come back to connecting some of these dots here, and that's what I love about this Solopreneur project because, I mentioned a lot of things there, networking, referral marketing. We're going to talk about social media. That's why I think it's so important to start getting this stuff working together and at least think about how to do it. Also, we're going to talk about collaboration because when you're really firing on all cylinders here, it makes a huge difference in helping level up your business. So, great conversation today, Corey. We're going to get ready for our 11 o'clock guest here, and we'll see you back here in a couple minutes, folks. Thanks for listening.